It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Wednesday, August 16th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that is a little surprised, but not surprised. But stranger things did happen with the Fedotov decision here.
We knew it wasn't going to be clean and easy.
That is true. We're going to get into the implications of that, look at some camp battles, and answer your mailbag questions all on today's show.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there. Thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on the app formerly known as Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here as always with Russ Cohen, who's on all your favorite social media apps at Sportsology. As a show, we're on Instagram and Threads and Blue Sky at Locked On Flyers as well. You can subscribe or follow us for free over on YouTube or on the SiriusXM app. Anywhere you listen to podcasts, subscribe to get our latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Russ, on Monday's show, we talked about the impending decision from the IIHF on the Flyers' challenge to Ivan Fedotov's contract with CSKA in the KHL. And, we said there was a chance that they would rule in the Flyers' favor. And lo and behold, they did, but there's like an asterisk next to it here because the ruling and the results of that ruling and the sanctions they put on CSKA and Ivan Fedotov at the moment don't seem to affect the Flyers, right?
No, there's no real teeth there. And I want to make sure people understand like that 2-week period that they gave Fedotov to, either come to the US or say that he wants to play for the Flyers or whatever. There's things restricting him from doing that. I think we all can see that.
Yeah.
So again, that's why it didn't matter if the Flyers won this or not. Like, unless they say, go ahead, you are free to leave, he's not leaving.
Yeah, and obviously there's a lot of baggage around that too, in
Yes.
terms of family and in terms of,
Yeah.
long-term situation and, it there is so much unspoken things
Oh,
here
it's
that you
almost
just
all unspoken. It's like
yeah,
this is like the Flyers proved a point, and that's good. It's
right.
not going to change the dynamic of hockey in the United States or Russia or their relations. I don't think it gets a transfer agreement going between the two leagues. I think it just becomes even more fractured. And so again, even if Cap Friendly says he's on loan, sure, yeah, if you want to call it a loan, it's really not a loan. Whereas
Right.
Kolosov is on loan because Minsk is
Yep.
allowing them to contact the player, stay in touch, and they'll call them. That's different. This is different.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, the official sanctions are Fedotov can't play until January in Russia or for Russia. So that's actually bad for CSKA in terms of having the goaltender they wanted
Right.
in net until then. But that doesn't really affect the bigger picture here. It also says that CSKA can't do any international transfers for a year, which okay, they'll live, right? Like not a big deal for them. And like, obviously, we've just talked about the fact that it does not change anything about the likelihood of him playing for the Flyers because of all those unspoken things. He probably would have extreme difficulty returning to Russia and playing in the KHL in the future, as many players do when they want to return home, like
Right.
later in their careers and
Right.
such. And I think that because of the other relationships, such as the one you just talked about with Kolosov and Minsk, it seems very isolated to CSKA at the moment, and it's not going to really affect the ability of similar things like Kolosov with other teams and other clubs in the KHL, right?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, Flyers aside, best case scenario is Fedotov at least plays for CSKA this year because I'm sure they want him to. He's really good. Worst case scenario is he plays for nobody again.
Yeah.
And that could happen.
Yeah, because I think that it could end up being worse in the end, depending on what the IIHF decides to do. Because CSKA has 7 days to appeal, and it seems like the Russian Federation is going to go all in to support CSKA if they choose to appeal, like according to the official statement that they put out.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think Valery Kamensky is in charge now, and he certainly stole money from the New York Rangers and a few other clubs, but he was a good player for the most part. But yeah, I mean, they switch people all the time, like who's in charge of the Russian Hockey Federation. So it's hard for me to really treat it seriously because everybody they put in seems to have the same opinion. Rachel, it's really odd.
Shocking development there. So I think one of the more interesting things about the ruling when it happened on Monday is, at least as of recording now on Tuesday, the Flyers have not put out a statement about any of this.
Yeah, they may wait till the 7 days is over. They may never say anything because it probably, if they say something about it, then it produces more questions than answers. And so, me personally, if I'm the club, I just leave it alone.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I expected something like, we have nothing, no comment while this is an
Right,
ongoing
right.
process. There's just something to be like,
Yeah,
yes, we
okay, that's
acknowledge
fair. If you wanted to see that
that's,
little meme on Twitter or on X,
yeah.
whatever that thing is, yeah. But you know, we didn't.
We did not. So stay tuned, I guess. We'll see if they make any statement or if it waits until the 7 days runs out. So that would be next Monday. We'll see how that plays out. In the meantime, still don't have Fedotov on the Flyers. But one of the other stories we have been following is Alex Bump, who had been initially committed to University of Vermont, but as we talked about previously on the show, Vermont fired head coach Todd Woodcroft because of some improprieties, and Bump had specifically committed to Vermont because of that coach, and so he had entered the transfer portal. We now know that he is going to be attending Western Michigan instead, so at least he has found a home to play at this upcoming
Yeah, I
season.
mean, at least he has a place to play. I think in Western Michigan, he could probably get a similar chance that he would get in Vermont, but wouldn't get at like a Minnesota or Boston University or Boston College.
Right. Just a little side fun note: Cam Knuble is on Western Michigan right now, so there's a loose connection to another Flyers prospect and Flyers alum there.
Yep, yep. They have them all. They've got the full collection now.
All right. And then just want to also just give a quick condolences to family and friends
Yeah.
of Ryan Amirov, the Leafs' 15th overall selection in the 2020 draft. He passed away after brain cancer. Just so awful.
Couple year battle, really tough. Good kid. I followed him on Instagram. Certainly had seen him play. Certainly had talked about how talented he was, but he also seemed like a really good guy, and he really was positive for these last 2 years. Like and so yeah, it makes me sad.
Yeah, same. Just just awful for that whole family and community.
Yeah,
Um it's not often that we have a chance to say some nice things about Comcast and what they do, but I
hmm
think one area that they have done a great job on is in terms of the renovations to the Wells Fargo Center and the fact that they proactively took that on, and didn't get any tax dollars or anything to really support that. They're like, yes, the building needs some upgrades. We're going to do it. They've done it. I think a lot of it has been really great. I think it's added to the fan experience of everyone who goes to events in the building. And you see some other teams like struggling to get arena deals. And I think on this front, I think we can be grateful as Flyers fans. And the big example I would say is obviously what's going on in Arizona, but the Hurricanes recently had a little battle with this as well.
Yeah, they just signed a 20-year lease extension. I think it goes through 2044, but check my math. Um, and they get, I think, like 300 million to use for upgrades. Um, where I give Comcast a lot of credit is, like Don Waddell was on the press conference and talking about his 100 or so action items that they wanted to take care of, and so far they had taken care of, like, I don't know, let's say it was like 39, 40, something like that, and they're going to do more, but it can't cover them all, so they'll put it in priority, and this is good for the fan. Yeah, it's great, but if you want to do the rest of the list, ask your boss. He's a billionaire. He could do it. I
Yep.
mean, I don't blame Charlotte for not going all in and giving them more. I think what they gave is fair, and they'll do something with it. It's a pretty nice place anyhow, and they are definitely making money with that team. And yeah, I think, and I'm sure the owner has put in a certain amount, and I'm sure he could show me the receipts. But I always say, we're getting to the point in the world where getting money out of your constituents for arenas and football stadiums and those kinds of things, it's getting tougher and tougher. So
Yeah,
sometimes you got to use your own money.
you do. All right, we are going to switch gears and talk about some potential battles at training camp this year for some open roster spots. And we are going to do that coming up next.
Football season's about to kick off, and FanDuel's giving you a chance to win all season long. Because right now, when you bet on a Super Bowl winner, you can get bonus bets every time they win in the regular season. Just pick any team to win the Super Bowl, and you'll get bonus bets for every victory. You could use your bonus bets on spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. Like, hey, if you want to bet that the Jets going to make it to the Super Bowl or win the Super Bowl, they have probably good odds on that too. So visit
Good
FanDuel
words.
.com/locked on. I don't think they're going to make it this year, Rachel. Sorry. Um, and start earning bonus bets with America's #1 sports book. That's FanDuel.com/locked on. Take some time to visit FanDuel and include money lines, props, and more around your team.
On Friday's show, we are going to give the results on our summer poll this week on who will win the Metro division. So make sure you've gotten your voice heard. The link to that poll that's over on YouTube will be in today's show notes. Russ, I was thinking ahead to training camp
Mhm.
as my nemesis of the week was this wait for training camp. So looking ahead to it, I was wondering like what the key battles were going to be in terms of what were the open spots that would be up for grabs and who might be part of those battles. And I think, because where I started off in my head was looking at the defense. And to me, based on who they have signed, it seems like it's just going to be the sixth and seventh D at this point because everybody else is pretty much locked in. And the fact, that they signed Mark Stahl, they're like, obviously he's going to be a part of the defense, right?
Yeah. I would say the top four is pretty set. Maybe the number 5 or 6 is up for grabs, like you said. 7, sure. So I think you're right about that. I think it's a situation where we're not saying this defense is so good. It's just there. There's no spots, but we're saying like whoever the guys are. Maybe York will be the number one. He probably won't be, but I'm just saying those are the kinds of things they'll be jostling around in camp for that. But it's nothing that's gonna actually be of great significance to this season, I don't think, unless all of a sudden Ronnie Attard makes the team, looks great, and now they're going to put him on the second power play and everything's clicking on him. Aside from something like that happening, I think it'll be kind of boring. But you know, I'm going to go out and say the second goaltender spot is a big deal, and again could turn into something bigger. We don't know. We don't know about Hockey Canada or anything like that. So I just think goaltending in general, there should be a battle, like period.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think that in a lot of ways in the past, it's been mostly clear who the goaltenders were going to
Right.
be. And so when they were making decisions in terms of reps and who was going to play in the different preseason games and what the balance was in terms of scrimmages and all of that, I think it was much easier for the Flyers coaching staff to really make those choices, and it was about getting reps, getting in game shape, and managing workload, right, in the preseason. This time, there's going to be some questions to be answered. And so, how they think about who plays in each preseason game, I think it's going to have to be a slightly different approach here, right?
Yeah, I mean, even Cal Peterson's in that mix. Like you have to keep him in that mix. So again, he has pro experience. You got to see what he can do. You got to give Sandstrom a chance to see what he can do. I mean, Ersson's got 12 games of experience, folks. It's not like I'm me personally, and again, I always treat it like me first. I'm not handing him a job. I need to see what he can do. He's got
No.
to go in and prove it. And I'm sure to some degree he'll have to do that with the Flyers. But again, if certain things were to happen with the Flyers, guys are just going to get slotted in regardless. And that's I don't want to see that happen. I'd rather there be legit competition. But it's hard to say because if they're all of a sudden short, then we might just see it's a battle to see who the one is and the backup is. But I'd like to, just to be a battle overall, just to see and include Carter Hart in that. Like Carter Hart should still never feel 100% comfortable. He shouldn't, especially. I mean, again, we know that he's going to make a decision on his future at some point. I can't just hand him the job this year. I've got to give these other guys a chance to beat him at that job simply because what if Carter Hart's not on the team in the coming years? And I didn't run that camp the way that I should have, where I should have had let everybody know, hey, nothing is certain here. They're not going to say that, but you got to let there be a real good open competition.
So if you had to, like, I know this is way in advance, right? We haven't even seen them hit the ice yet, but in terms of setting the tone for this goaltending battle, who's the goaltender you put in the first preseason game for the Flyers?
First preseason game, I'll put Sam Ersson because I just gave him a 2-year deal, but I want to see him split it with Petersen first game.
That's yeah, I think that's spot on. I think I might start Petersen actually and put Ersson in the second half of that game, or or however they decide to split it. But I think that we need to get Ersson out there as quickly as possible. But also you need to sort of say, okay, Cal Petersen, like you're here, like what can you do for us, right? And you need to give him every ample opportunity to prove it right away. And so I think that first preseason game is going to have a lot of pressure associated with it for the goaltenders, because you also have, players on the opposing team who, skaters who need to score goals to make an impression, right?
Yeah.
And know that they're going to be cut almost immediately if they don't make an impression in that first game. And so that's where I'm just like, I think who the Flyers put up in that first game is going to be very important.
Now, presumably, we'll know by then about the Hockey Canada stuff. I say presumably because I thought we'd known by now.
Who knows?
So I can't say for sure.
Yeah. You would think there would be some sort of attention paid to like when the preseason starts, but you never know. It is the NHL and it is Hockey Canada, so we'll see. But as far as the forward battles go, again, with some of these, off-season signings and adding extra depth with some veterans, obviously, I think Garnet Hathaway is going to make the opening night roster.
Oh, yeah, he's making it.
And Ryan Poehling, I think, is like 75 to 85%. He's locked in, right?
He's not making it.
Yeah, so that takes up all these extra slots. And so we've talked in the past about Wade Allison kind of potentially being an odd man out, assuming that Atkinson is healthy, right? Because that's
the whole thing. So someone like Allison has to really show his best in case Cam Atkinson comes up short, like game or two into the season, or again, like last year. He's got to be ready. And so he's got to be mentally prepared, like, hey, I've got to be able to take that job from Cam Atkinson. Like if it were me, I would be like, I've got to win that job and try and win that job. And I think that's what Allison has to do, because I think if he puts up enough of a fight in camp that he could win that job, then that will make the Flyers have to, make some decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think that, there's going to be some other prospects that are going to make a run at it. Obviously, I think Bobby Brink is going to make a run at it. I don't think he'll make it, but I think he'll be part of the conversation. We talked about, in one of our previous polls, Tyson Forster is probably a lock to
Yeah, he's
make it.
close to a lock at this point.
Close to a lock, but I think the other guy that's going to try and make a huge impression is Elliot Desnoyers.
I think Desnoyers and Attard, but if you're just talking offensively, definitely
Yeah.
Desnoyers. Yeah, and I think he's going to come up a little short too. I think he'll be one of those guys that's there to the end. He got a little experience last year. I think he's rounded out his game pretty good. I still don't know what kind of scorer he's going to be at the NHL level. That's the question, is the role and what really can he produce point wise, because he's going to have to produce point wise to really have a career in this league. He's not going to be just a fourth line penalty killer type.
And then secondarily, I would say Ollie Lixel is going to try and make a positive impression.
Ollie Lixel could have 75 points in the preseason, Rachel, and he's not going to make the starting opening night roster. Like, we just know.
I think he's going to make himself known. I think that he knows he knows he's going to have to perform above it.
He could lead the team in goals in preseason, and he probably doesn't make the opening night roster.
All right. Well, and then there's also Tanner.
It's just the way it is. I mean, you saw last year. He didn't get much of a chance.
I know. All right. And then I think Tanner Lazinski will be the depth forward.
Yes.
But, again, we'll see what he looks like coming into camp. But these battles should be real interesting. We'll get more into some specifics as camp gets going in a few weeks. I can't believe it's a few weeks from now, but that will be the case. In the meantime, we have some mailbag questions from y'all to answer, and we will do that coming up next. All right. Kevin B on YouTube asks us, he thinks one spoken or unspoken belief that we, meaning us, Russ, hold is that our concern that John Tortorella is the wrong coach at this time and his presence has already diminished potential asset trade value, and his desire to win will block younger players from being on the team. Are we just wondering when it will come to a head and Briere will likely fire him suddenly? Like, when will that happen? And if so, when?
I mean, I do believe it probably happens at some point. I think, John's got the whole season, though. I don't think there's any issue there. I think what he says is interesting as far as looking into the future. What you have to hope here is that, again, that the culture is so strong and that the team is so hard to play against that the few things that fall, on the wayside, you have to just live with because the greater good has been served here. That's what your hope is, because it's no longer about wins and losses anymore. It will be to John, but when we're talking about it, it's really not, because they're not a Stanley Cup contender. They're just not.
Yeah. And I absolutely believe the respect between the two of them is there so that Tortorella will go a full season, and if at that time there's like an indication that maybe Tortorella isn't the right coach moving forward, it's going to be a mutual, like, positive parting of the ways that'll be treated as a retirement. Like, it won't be anything contentious.
No. I agree with that. And so, yeah, I mean, we kind of have to let it play out, though. It's a little hard to figure out right now.
Mario wants to know, in today's NHL, would a GM draft a forward in the first or second round specifically to play on the third or fourth line, since bottom six scoring is so important to winning a Stanley Cup, and also use a high pick on a defenseman, knowing that player will probably end up on the third pairing?
Okay, so as far as first round, third pairing, probably not, because it always has to be a higher shot than that. But I did have some scouts say that, hey, if it's later in the first round and you get a top 9 guy, that's still okay on offense. So it really, I still believe in that. Now, if you're drafted in the top 10, do you want it to be top 9? No. But, what if the guy's a top 9 player? Let's say he's a Scott Lawton, and Scott Lawton plays, a whole bunch of games in the NHL like it looks like he's going to. It's a successful pick. It's just a pick that you say, all right, maybe they could have gotten a little more out of the pick, but it's still a successful pick. So it's like, that's how I kind of look at it and break it down.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that it depends on what your current situation is, will affect your draft strategy. And if that's your missing piece, or you can predict that that will be your missing piece 2 to 3 years down the road, then that's a great pick for you, right? So, and like the right guy is there. It's like all the
Yeah,
stars aligning and
yeah.
coming together in terms of what the right pick is at the right time. CA Conrad wants to know about a potential Konecny trade to the Caps, with the Flyers holding some money for Ryan Leonard, or the rights to Ryan Leonard in return, who we talked about a lot on this show in our draft coverage. The Caps are still in win now mode and need to counter all those Pens moves. Is that a move that you could see happening?
No, I give that one no chance at all, unfortunately, because they love Leonard. They
Yeah.
they've started to build their new young core. They gave Tom Wilson a long-term deal because I think they could see down the line he's probably the next captain whenever Alex Ovechkin decides to hang it up, and that's when things will change. And so they're not going to make a move like that. Like Leonard is part of their future.
Yeah, I think so too. They were very pleased with their
Oh
draft,
yeah.
and it was a real good draft for the Caps this year. They're holding on to these kids. Guido wants to know, who do you see as the top six Flyers defensemen in 2 to 3 years? It's not easy to predict.
Yeah, I mean, I can't do the top six right now, but you want Adder to be in there. I still want Zamula to be in there. Like that's for me. I'm just looking at those two. Sanheim probably still there because of contract, and Stahl won't be there, obviously, and York will be there. So I mean, that's 4 or 5 there. I got to leave a little room open for surprises, potential, all that kind of stuff. Bonk, you think would
Oh yeah,
he be
I
there
was
at
gonna
that
say.
point? You don't know. I mean, development wise, you would hope he's there at that point, but you don't know. That's kind of where I stand. So if I came up one or two short, so be it. But that's how I kind of look at it right
Right. I think like Bonk is the one that you really hope pans out and is
now.
is going to be there. But I do think that maybe in a perfect world, maybe Brian Zanetti pans out.
Okay,
We talked about him
that's fair.
earlier this week, and then I think the other guy that you hope pans out and is part of that conversation is Ethan Sampson.
Okay, I like it.
Yeah, and then, maybe Adam Ginning rounds out the bottom pairing
Yes,
for you.
that's
But,
another good move too.
uh, we'll see how that pans out, as the Flyers' development continues over the next couple of years. Our last question, Nina wants to know, what's your early take on Russian skater Ivan, Demidov? Not sure if that's how you pronounce it, but, he's a draft-eligible, Russian forward for this upcoming year.
Yeah, I just started to see stuff on him with the EP guys, so I'm not there yet. I'm not ready to give a report on him, but certainly a talent. But let's give it a little time. I'm not ready to talk about it.
Yeah. I think once we start talking about like camps for World Juniors, that's when we
Yes.
can start talking about draft prospects
Yeah.
for next year. So we have some more data to
I don't like to
consider
just
in
throw stuff
those.
out and then have to backtrack it after because I was, a little too aggressive early on. I kind of like to have an even keel if possible. I mean, not always the case.
Yep, absolutely. All right, that will do it for our mailbag and our show for today. Thanks once again for making us your first listen. On Friday's show, we'll have those summer poll results about who will win the Metro division. Plus, we're hoping to talk about the overall Flyers prospect pool and how it compares to the rest of the NHL. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. If you've got questions that we haven't answered on the show, you can send them to us via the app formerly known as Twitter at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail or comment over on YouTube. I'm Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
Have a fantastic day, everyone.